West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Right. On yesterday's show, we picked apart the false narrative emerging from several prominent voices that Donald Trump might be unfit for office, but they can't yet vote for Vice President Harris because she hasn't given enough details about her policies.
Well, I mean, you listen to Donald Trump on the policies.
And, you know, you should...
And you're like going, is this Lincoln?
Right.
Like, is this like a,
he talked
philosopher
again yesterday.
king, a bit of Aristotle
I'm sure that was helpful
in there?
to you.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind when listening to some of what Trump had to say at his rally last night in Pennsylvania.
And Vladimir wanted it badly. That was the apple of his eye. Ukraine was the apple of his eye. But I said, don't do it. He would have never gone in. Would have never happened. All these things would have never happened. But Ukraine now, I see Zelensky is here. I think Zelensky's the greatest salesman in history. Every time he comes into the country, he walks away with $60 billion. Billion! Walks in with $60 billion. He wants them to win this election so badly. Even before, as president-elect, if I win this election, the first thing I'm going to do is call up Zelensky and call up President Putin, and I'm going to say, you got to make a deal. This is crazy. What a horrible thing has happened just because, and it's our fault because it's a war that should have never been allowed to happen. We didn't have one terror attack during my administration. With all the terror attacks all over the world, we didn't have countries fighting each other. They wouldn't have done it without my permission. They would call me up to ask whether or not they could go to war with some other country. And I said, you can't do that. And if you do that, I'm going to put big taxes all over your country. Okay, we won't do it. And they'd call me up the next day. We've decided not to go to the war. We had no wars. These guys actually want these people in our country. It's not even believable. Working with left-wing nonprofits to inundate Pennsylvania communities, changing the character of small towns and villages all over our country and changing them forever. They will never be the same. They will never be. Do you think Springfield will ever be the same? I don't think. The fact is, and I'll say it now, you have to get them the hell out. You have to get them out. I'm sorry. Get them out. Can't have it. Can't have it. They've destroyed it. It's terrible. It's terrible to say, and it's a tough thing to do. What the damage that Sleepy Joe, you know, I'm tending to call him Sleepy Joe lately because I called him Crooked Joe, but now he's not like, is he, who's our president? We don't even have, do we have a president? Why doesn't he leave? Why doesn't he leave? Now think of it. Think of it. I call him Crooked Joe. That was very effective. It got him out of the race. I mean, guess what? No, we had a debate, and he didn't do too well in that debate. And they came to him and they said, you're down 21 points and you're going to lose. This can only happen to me. So I end up with somebody new. But here's the thing. All I have to do is expose her for what she is. She's a communist, okay? She's a communist. And this country is not ready for a communist and hopefully never will be, because that doesn't work. And remember this, and I just say this, if you look at Ukraine and Russia, but you know they say Russia. I stopped the Russian pipeline. It's called Nord Stream 2. Nobody ever heard of it until I came along. I stopped the biggest economic development job, the biggest job they've ever done. I stopped it cold. When Biden came in, he let them build, but he killed our Keystone pipeline, which we needed. He killed Keystone, so he killed, but think of it. And remember this about Russia. Under Bush, they took a lot. Under Biden and Barack Hussein Obama, has anyone ever heard of him? Barack Hussein, a lot of people say he's actually running the country right now. I don't think so. I don't think so. But some people say he's running our country. But I don't think it's Biden. Under Barack Hussein Obama, they took a lot, right? Under Biden, they're taking everything. They're taking everything.
Okay, in that, I guess what he would call the weave. There were so many disgusting, hateful things in there. It's hard to keep up. I know we're focused on foreign policy, but if I could just say his comments about Springfield. Yeah, Springfield has never been the same since Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and their violent rhetoric has wreaked chaos, havoc, fear, and upended the lives of countless people in that town. Ohio's Republican governor wrote an op-ed asking Donald Trump and J.D. Vance to stop, explaining the damage they have done to Springfield, and speaking up for the legal Haitian immigrants who live in Springfield, who add to the economy, who add to the society, who are good people. And it was very, very clear what is going on in Springfield is at the hands of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and that violent rhetoric.
And by the way, speaking of violent
and lies.
Speaking of rhetoric, I mean, she's a communist. We can never have a communist running this country. Yeah, the communist that is proposing $50,000 tax breaks for first-time small business owners. The communist that's proposing $25,000 tax cuts, tax incentives for first-time home buyers. The communist who is putting together tax incentives, private incentives to help spur 3 million new homes for construction over the next 4 years. Doesn't sound like a communist to me. You know why? Because it's not a communist. But it's interesting. Wall Street Journal editorial page. I talked about a column or two that I read over the weekend, and you did too. Very disturbing columns. But Wall Street Journal editorial page, again, been very responsible on Donald Trump's lies, the big lie, been very responsible talking about the lunacy that has taken over the Republican Party many times. It really has. And this morning, Ryan Ruth's political motives at the end said, we'll learn more as the case proceeds, but Ruth sounds like the type of person that could be triggered into murder by our ugly political debates. It's another reason for the country's leaders to avoid inflammatory end-of-days rhetoric against political opponents and about the consequences of losing a presidential election. Of course, Donald Trump said it's all the Democrats' fault. Dan Henninger said it's all the Democrats' fault. And then immediately thereafter, Donald Trump started talking about, because this is when he was attacking Democratic rhetoric. In the same Truth Social post, he says, because of this communist left rhetoric, the bullets are flying and it will only get worse. And he always accuses the left. He always accuses Kamala Harris, who now is being attacked for actually being in the center of being communist. But Willie, really quickly, we were going over the false equivalency of people saying, oh, well, you know, Donald Trump, he may be bad, but at least we know where he stands on policy. We don't know where Kamala stands, so how can we vote for her? We do know where she stands on a hell of a lot of policies. But here's where Donald Trump stands on policies. The people that said, yeah, but we know where he stands, and so we're going to vote for him. Zelensky, for Donald Trump, we just heard there, is the bad guy. Putin, a victim.
Yeah.
Vladimir Putin invades Ukraine. Who does Donald Trump say is at fault? The United States of America. He blames the city brightly shining on the hill for all the world to see. The city that has pushed back Russian aggression now since 1945. The country that has liberated much of Eastern Europe and is now trying to help liberate Ukraine. But Donald Trump blames America. He doesn't blame Vladimir Putin. He never has. And so for all these people that want to vote for him, are desperately seeking permission structure to vote for him, you will be voting for a man who says America is at blame for Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine. We made him do it. You go down the list. By the way, that sounds a lot like a certain historian who has been in the news lately and promoted, who said that in World War II, Hitler wasn't the villain. Churchill was the bad guy. And Hitler in the Holocaust, well, this person says it was just poor logistics, and they ended up deciding it was actually more humane to kill 6 million Jews than to let them slowly starve. Donald Trump talks about mass deportation, the villages that have been changed. It's like he thinks Shrek has come to the villages of Pennsylvania. Mass deportations, the crowd chanting, send them back. The antithesis. If there are any conservatives left out there who actually remember Ronald Reagan in his farewell speech talked about what small business owners in Springfield are talking about, how immigrants revive economies. How immigrants make America forever young. Ronald Reagan said it, his farewell speech. But Donald Trump in this speech is talking, and the crowd's chanting, I think, send them back, send them back. And then he's talking about massive tariffs. He's going to end wars by slapping massive tariffs on products that will destroy America's economy. If not destroy America's economy, let me restate that. It will crush working class Americans and middle-class Americans. And then he brings up the debate against Joe Biden, but for some reason doesn't bring up the debate against Kamala Harris, doesn't bring up the fact that he dodged yet again her request, her demand for a second debate. He keeps dodging it, Willie. Why? Because he's horrible on the issues. And yet there's this flattening. Donald Trump will say that. And then you'll have people, and we'll get to Tom Nichols on this, but then we'll have people going, yeah, but what does Kamala Harris really think about quantitative easing? And yes, I understand that she's going to talk about $50,000 tax breaks for first-time small business owners and entrepreneurs and family businesses and people starting businesses on Main Street, USA. But what are the long-term tax ramifications about that? Well, Donald Trump just goes on stage and grunts and says nonsensical things.
Yeah, and on the policy about some of the people you're talking about, wealthy Republicans, wealthy independents, a lot of those guys we've seen out in Silicon Valley who've come out and said, well, I've got to go with Donald Trump here. You just laid it out. Are you for tariffs? Are you for record-breaking debt? Is the Dow closing a little too high? The Dow and the S&P closed at record highs again. This big September rally that's happening because of the Fed rate cut, all the things that are happening with this economy. So there's some policy for you on the other side, too, if you actually want to look at it. Perhaps they're using those as cover for something else, for some other reason they don't want to vote for Kamala Harris.
It is Tuesday, the 24th of September of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and we will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot-smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Always has. And it always will. It will. And it has. How are you on this fine day? I feel compelled to remind folks that you could use the Spanish paprika as well. And in fact, they have increased their production in Spain for paprika quite, well, tremendously in the past 5 years. Not quite as much as what Hungary produces, but they are equally as, they're equal in terms of taste, texture, color, etc. Spanish paprika tends to be more expensive because there's less of it, but they're making more now, so the cost is coming down. Oh, I know, albeit incrementally. But I'm just saying, if you have some Spanish paprika around there, hot, smoked Spanish paprika, use it. It's fine. You can do it. It's not a collector's item, okay? I'm just saying. Alrighty, so what else is going on in the world? Oh boy. I'm a little upset at the hacking of the Trump campaign and the deep sixing of that. I haven't spoken very much about it. I'm glad that David went through that quite succinctly. So take a listen to his podcast later I'm sure you didn't miss his show. But listen to it again because it's a head scratcher on why the media is doing what they are doing. And I have an idea. I just loved how when you listen to him now, our media will reward you mightily. And who was that media? Maggie, Brett, etc. God, it's unbelievable. Yeah, he had some journalists embedded in there doing the bidding, and it makes one wonder. Have these so-called journalists been on the Russian payroll, Iranian payroll, Chinese payroll? Could they, by chance, delved into the dark science of espionage against the United States of America? Now, these are terrible charges to be levied, but we're left with a question about why certain members of our media placed in, let's say, fairly powerful positions of influence are somehow part of a Russian influence campaign. Oh, I was just a useful dupe. Oh, I'm just an idiot, a useful idiot. Useful idiot. Okay, I'm sorry. And then just a plain dupe. No, I'm a dupe. A whole network, or should I correct myself, networks of right-wing media buying up local church radio stations, church TV channels and stations, buying them all up, putting in your national desk where you'll get fair and balanced propaganda marketed just for the rural mind. Okay. Influence. It's not about what we would call brainwashing. We're talking influence, and that's all it takes. I don't know why I think those Haitians are going to kill us in our sleep. I just feel it to be true. Why? Because you've been told for so long? Is that it? Well, could be. I thought, as Americans, our civic duty was not to fall prey to that BS. But apparently, the only patriots are the ones who can be influenced. Do you know that your government schools are grooming your kids to be empathetic about other people and just accepting of the immigrant and DEI and CRT and BLM and oh my God. All the while, they've set up these right-wing think tanks where they groom prospects, either going into the elected class or into the media. Yeah, not talking about that very much, and I wonder why. Because our media will reward you mightily. All right. Well, it's disheartening, I gotta tell you. Because hiding behind the First Amendment to destroy the United States of America is, I always thought, kind of like a wrong thing to do. It's yelling fire in a crowded theater. Except it's worse. It's throwing a bomb into the crowded theater and saying, I have a First Amendment right to report on the results. Here, let me send you some demure titty pics. And that makes you wonder why that, I don't know, rocket rise to the top in one's early 20s was able to occur when she was a racist pig the whole time. God. Okay, I'm just saying. I am just saying. The goose steps like a duck. I'm calling it a goose stepping. Uh-oh. Some alert. Maybe it's just the dryer. You know, everything is smart now. And I know probably it was a mistake to link all my devices so I know when my dryer is done. As if I've never heard the bell ring from across the house all the way back here in, well, you know, the studio of the mothership. Mm-hmm. The brains, the bridge. Okay, well, what else is happening in the world? Everything. Everything is happening. I'm really enjoying fall, though. I am. I like the little change in the weather. Alrighty, well, you know, since we, in weeks past, because of any number of issues in terms of, well, mourning the loss of loved ones and loved pets, too, because they're loved ones, we kind of had a rather rambling opening, so why don't we stop the rambling and get down to a little bit of order. Yeah, a little bit. What do we have curated for you here in the rest of this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we begin in the Bistro Cafe? Can you feel it? Don't know, just feel. All right, starting off on the menu here. Well, at the top, yes, that's Trump blaming the U.S. for everything. Yes, the war in Ukraine. The U.S. is to blame for this asteroid headed our way. Yeah, I bet. On the rest of the menu, Oregon removed 1,200 voters from the rolls for failing to provide proof of citizenship. Now, they make it seem like the onus is on the people that got removed when they were put on and they didn't know it. Okay, let's just be clear. Anyway, it was a snafu in the DMV, and they removed them because after they asked, they couldn't provide proof of citizenship. Okay, I get it now. I should have thought about that before I put that headline up. But we'll explain it more when we get into the article. Continuing, well, an elections board in Ohio will not use the county sheriff's department for election security after the sheriff's posts about Harris yard signs. Yeah, he told people to pull a Stasi and make a list of all the people who have Harris yard signs for a little bit of reprisal if anything bad happens. And you know what that means. Oh, And California becomes the latest state to restrict student smartphone use at school. A lot of parents are upset because, well, what if there's a mass shooting and my kid can't get a hold of me? Well, actually, your kids still can. They just can't use their smartphones while they're in class, okay? After the break, we move to the chef's table where the Pakistani Taliban denied attacking a convoy of foreign ambassadors. Usually they would they would claim that. So who knows? Oh, and reconstruction is set to begin on Copenhagen's 400-year-old fire-damaged old stock exchange landmark. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Thank Tom and Kelly for everything that they do here at Netroots Radio and have been doing for the duration of this, well, powerhouse of resistance that's concerned about the direction of democracy and, in fact, democracy itself. So thank you for being such stalwarts in such a campaign, because it won't end. I'm sorry, it won't. And also, thank you, Ricky, also. And for those of you out there, catch Ricky and Kelly on the late night, early morning talk show on Saturday night, Sunday morning. So do that. Also, if you could become recurring Patreons of Netroots Radio, that would be really nice. If you could send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, that would really help. And it has, for those who have been so generous over these so many years. Thank you. Okay, follow me on social media at Justice Putnam. You'll have quick access to the show notes and links diaries that are posted 10 minutes before showtime so that you can, well, peruse the actual articles written by the actual reporters. And, you know, you can add your own little literary and dramatic embellishments, as I do. You can. Alrighty, let's see. Why don't we right now tuck into this first offering that we have curated for you here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And I see now that one of the reasons that the headline on this particular article was so lacking in what actually happened, I see it's because it was late and I wasn't feeling well when I put today's show together, which it's still a good show, but it's from the Associated Press and by Claire Rush. And I know that Claire is not responsible for the headline. There's some editor there who has done this, but we'll clarify some things as we go. Okay, so Oregon election officials said yesterday, Monday, they had struck over 1,200 people from the state's voter rolls after determining they did not provide proof of U.S. citizenship when they were registered to vote. And it wasn't because they went in there to register to vote. They went in there to renew their license or to get a license, and they aren't citizens. They're green card holders or any number of things, you know, students on foreign visas, whatevs. Or in many cases, actually people who are just about to become citizens. Went in simply to renew a driver's license, pay a property tax, any number of things that brings you into the state offices. You are registered to vote. It's not as if they went in to register to vote and then surreptitiously didn't provide proof of citizenship. They didn't provide proof of citizenship because they don't have it. My God. So this is a clerical error, and let's be clear about the numbers here and how things get inflated to the point where cats and dogs and geese across America are going to die in their sleep. That's right. Well, of those found to be possibly ineligible, only 9 people voted in elections since 2021, and that's from the Oregon Secretary of State's office. County clerks are working to confirm whether those people were indeed ineligible because, or when they cast their ballots, or just hadn't provided the required documentation when they were registered to vote, which could also be old people who can't find their birth certificate but have voted in every election since the early 50s, for instance. The disclosures come amid heightened security of voter rolls nationwide, from Oregon to Arizona and Texas. As the presidential election nears, you mean sort of like fear-mongering? Citing an influx of immigrants. Oh, it is fear-mongering, with a racial xenophobic component, as usual. Yes, the concern of an influx of immigrants in recent years at the U.S.-Mexico border, Republicans have raised concerns about the possibility that people who are not citizens will be voting, even though state data indicate such cases are rare. In Oregon, for example, the 9 people whose citizenship had not been confirmed and who cast ballots represent a tiny fraction of the state's 3 million registered voters. 10 people were found to have voted after being improperly registered, but several were later confirmed to be eligible, authorities said. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A local Ohio elections board says the county sheriff's department will not be used for election security following a social media post by the sheriff saying people with Kamala Harris yard signs should have their addresses recorded so that immigrants can be sent to live with them if the Democratic vice president wins the November election. Or in other words, other things too. In a statement on the Portage County Democrats Facebook page, County Board of Elections Chair Randy Kleitz said members voted 3-1 on Friday to remove the sheriff's department from providing security during in-person absentee voting. Kleitz cited public comments indicating perceived intimidation by our sheriff against certain voters, and the need to make sure every voter in Portage County feels safe casting their ballot for any candidate they choose. A Ravenna Record Courier story on the Akron Beacon Journal site reported that a day earlier, about 150 people crowded into a room at the Kent United Church of Christ for a meeting sponsored by the NAACP of Portage County, many expressing fear about the September 13th comments. I believe walking into a voting location where a sheriff deputy can be seen may discourage voters from entering, Kleitz said. The board is looking at using private security already in place at the administration building, or having Ravenna police provide security instead. Portage County Sheriff Bruce Shuchowski posted a screenshot of a Fox News segment criticizing President Joe Biden and Harris over immigration, likening people in the U.S. illegally to human locusts, he suggested recording addresses of people with Harris yard signs. How nice. Local Democrats filed complaints with the Ohio Secretary of State and other agencies, and the American Civil Liberties Union of Ohio accused Zuchowski of an unconstitutional, impermissible threat against residents who want to display political yard signs. Republican Governor Mike DeWine called the comments unfortunate and not helpful. The Secretary of State's office said the comments did not violate election laws, and it did not plan any action. Zuchowski, a Republican supporter of Donald Trump, said in a follow-up post that his comments may have been a little misinterpreted. He said, however, that while voters can choose whomever they want for president, they have to take responsibility for their actions. Oh no, there's no election intimidation meant there whatsoever. Austin at the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. School districts in California will have to create rules restricting student smartphone use under a new law Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom signed yesterday, Monday. The legislation makes California the latest state to try to curb student phone access in an effort to minimize distractions in the classroom and address the mental health impacts of social media on children. Florida, Louisiana, Indiana, and several other states have passed laws aimed at restricting student phone use at school. But some critics of phone restriction policies say the burden should not fall on teachers to enforce them. Others worry the rules will make it harder for students to seek help if there is an emergency, or argue that decisions on phone bans should be left up to individual districts or schools. We support those districts that have already acted independently to implement restrictions because, after a review of their needs of their stakeholders, they determined that made the most sense for their communities with regards to safety, school culture, and academic achievement, said Troy Flint, a spokesperson for the California School Boards Association. We simply oppose the mandate. You can't tell us what to do. Okay. Now, the law requires districts to pass rules by July 1st of 2026 to limit or ban students from using smartphones on campus or while students are under the supervision of school staff. Districts will have to update their policies every 5 years after that. The move comes after Newsom signed a law in 2019 authorizing school districts to restrict student phone access. In June, he announced plans to take on the issue again after the U.S. Surgeon General called on Congress to require warning labels on social media platforms and their effects on young people. The governor then sent letters to districts last month urging them to limit student devices or device use on campus. That came on a day that the board of the second largest school district in the country, Los Angeles Unified, voted to ban student phone use during the school day beginning in January. Assemblyman Josh Hoover, a Republican representing Folsom, introduced the bill with a bipartisan group of lawmakers who are also parents. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to this edition of PCD Soundbites. I'm Karen Ngowe, filling in for your host, Latoya Simmons. Current guidelines recommend adults get at least 2.5 hours of moderate-intensity aerobic activity a week, like brisk walking. But many Americans don't get enough physical activity to meet this guideline, which can lead to chronic disease and premature death. Joining me today is Dr. Susan Carlson, a lead epidemiologist in CDC's Division of Nutrition, Physical Activity, and Obesity. We'll be discussing her research, which aims to estimate the percentage of U.S. deaths attributed to inadequate levels of physical activity. Thank you for being here, Susan.
Thank you for inviting me, Karen.
Susan, give us a brief overview of your study.
As Karen stated, the current aerobic physical activity guideline recommends that adults participate weekly in at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity, or its equivalent for substantial health benefits. The health benefits include such things as lowering the risk of premature death, heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, certain types of cancers, and depression. In our study, we first examined what influence physical activity levels below the current guideline have on premature mortality, and we wanted to look at whether this association differed by age. The second purpose was really to estimate the percentage of deaths that are attributable to levels of physical activity that are inadequate to meet the current guideline.
What did your research reveal about the association between inadequate physical activity and premature death among American adults?
So in a nationally representative sample of U.S. adults, we found that adults with levels of physical activity inadequate to meet current guidelines had an increased risk of premature death. Overall, we found that 8.3% of deaths were attributed to inadequate levels of physical activity. Our findings suggest that if you increase adults' physical activity levels to meet the current guidelines, this is likely one way to reduce the risk of premature death in the United States.
What did you find when you looked at this association in different age groups?
We did not find a significant association between physical activity level and mortality in adults aged 25 to 39. However, for those aged 40 to 69 and 70 or older, we found that not meeting the guideline was associated with an increased risk of premature mortality.
How do these findings compare to previous similar studies?
We found that our estimates were similar or slightly lower when comparing to similar studies that have examined this association. In general, our estimates of the percent of deaths attributable to inadequate levels of physical activity is not practically different from other studies.
Do you think researchers have become better at estimating the percentage of deaths attributed to inadequate physical activity?
Estimating the percentage can be challenging. Many of the previous studies that have provided these estimates have done so by combining estimates across different sources. This can really bias results, especially if there are differences in the populations or if the physical activity measure differs. When you use a survival analysis conducted in a single population, which is what we did in this study, you can overcome a lot of these biases and improve your estimates. Facilitating the linking of CDC survey data from systems like the National Health Interview Survey to mortality data can really help researchers explore these issues.
How do you think this research can be used to help get adults moving and reduce the risk of premature death associated with inadequate physical activity?
So we found in this study that a significant portion of deaths were attributed to lower levels of physical activity. By estimating the public health burden of low levels of physical activity, this can be important for setting research and program priorities and for public health planning at the national, state, and local level. Ultimately, individuals make the decision to be active. However, this decision can be made easier by programs and policies that provide opportunities for physical activity and by making communities more activity-friendly. By working collaboratively across different sectors, communities across the nation can help to increase physical activity levels and potentially reduce the risk of premature death.
Thank you, Susan. You can read her study, Percentage of Deaths Associated with Inadequate Physical Activity in the United States, online at cdc.gov/PCD. The findings and conclusions in this report are those of the author and do not necessarily represent the official position of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. We have 3 updates, including a court decision favoring the over 97,000 Arizona voters who didn't have citizenship documents on file, a promising poll showing Colorado voters may embrace open primaries and ranked choice voting, and a court case by Robert F. Kennedy to sticker out his name in Wisconsin. The Arizona Supreme Court ruled September 20th that over 97,000 Arizonans who, because of a state error, were never asked for proof of citizenship documents, will vote using Arizona's full ballot. The state will work to correct the files after the 2024 election. Colorado Proposition 131 would implement single-ballot open primaries and use ranked choice voting should it pass in November. A poll of 800 voters by Colorado Voters First found 56% would vote for the initiative, 8% leaning yes, 21% no, and 4% leaning no. Another 11% were undecided. With hundreds of thousands of ballots printed and some early ballots already sent, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. appealed to have his name stickered over on the ballot after the Wisconsin Ballot Commission denied his request. The commission has since asked the Wisconsin Supreme Court to take the case. VoteBeat Wisconsin reported that local election officials expressed concern at the time it would take and the unknown impact it would have on the operation of optical ballot readers. We have more at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1789. Congress passed the Judiciary Act of 1789. This act established the plan for the U.S. Supreme Court. At first, the court was comprised of just 6 justices, appointed by the president with Senate confirmation. The number of justices varied until 1869, when it became set at 9. The Constitution granted the Supreme Court jurisdiction over all laws, but especially those where constitutionality was an issue. The highest court has played a key role in deciding some of the most challenging issues facing the United States. Up until the 1800s, rulings related to labor law were decided by state courts, but the Supreme Court became the deciding body for many labor questions. It was the Supreme Court that upheld the jailing of Eugene V. Debs for violating an injunction against organizing a boycott of the Pullman Palace Car Company in 1894. Injunctions continued to be a tool against labor stoppages. In another famous case, the Lowell v. Leller case, often referred as the Danbury Hatters case, Dietrich Low refused to recognize the Hatters Union. He replaced striking workers with scabs. The strikers organized a nationwide boycott of Low's hats. Low sued, and the case made it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. In 1809, the Supreme Court ruled against the strikers. The Supreme Court often showed an anti-worker bias. In the 1918 case, Hammer v. Dagenhart, the court ruled Congress could not enact laws regulating child labor. In another early 1900s case, Lochner v. New York, the Supreme Court ruled unconstitutional a New York law that mandated a limit of 10-hour workdays for bakers. Today, many important labor cases come before the Supreme Court. Do you think it's possible to return to the days of no minimum wage and child labor?
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs around 100. Mostly sunny today and hot, as if you couldn't tell by those temps. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the upper 50s. Winds out of the west northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then a mix of clouds and sun in the morning tomorrow, followed by cloudy skies during the afternoon, with highs topping around only 80. Oh my gosh, sweater weather. Winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Ragweed pollen is the predominant pollen here in our area, rated high, by the way. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 19 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is moderate at level 5. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.84 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 84%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 62 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 64 and cloudy. Rome is 75 and partly cloudy with a moderate advisory for rain. Kabul is 76 and clear. Hong Kong is 83 degrees and cloudy. Tokyo is 66 and mostly cloudy. Auckland, New Zealand is 55 degrees, cloudy and windy. San Francisco, California is 64 degrees and sunny. Chicago, Illinois is 68 and rain. And New York, New York is 64 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Maner Ahmed Working the world desk at the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The Pakistani Taliban yesterday, Monday, denied involvement in a bombing attack on a police convoy that was escorting foreign ambassadors in the restive Northwest, as authorities said they were still trying to determine who was behind it. Most of the ambassadors and senior envoys were traveling with their family members on Sunday to the Swat Valley, a former stronghold of the Pakistani Taliban, when the attack occurred in Malab Jaba, one of Pakistan's 2 ski resorts in the Khyber province bordering Afghanistan. No one claimed responsibility for the attack, but Mohammad Khorasani, a spokesman for the Pakistani Taliban, denied detonating the improvised explosive device that hit a police vehicle accompanying the convoy. A police officer was killed, and 4 others were wounded in the attack, which drew strong condemnation from Pakistan's President Zardari, Prime Minister Sharif, and other officials. The envoys were all unharmed, but the attack suggested there was a security breach. For sure it was a security breach because the convoy's route was only known to police, and the bomb disposal unit had reportedly cleared the route, said Abdullah Khan, a defense analyst and managing director of the Islamabad-based Pakistan Institute for Conflict and Security Studies. Some insider appears to have leaked the information about the travel plans of the foreign ambassadors to the militants, he added. Khan said the attack signaled a shift in the approach of the insurgents, who previously targeted security forces. Pakistan defense analyst Saeed Muhammad Ali said there was a need for better coordination between federal authorities and police about such high-profile visits to the Northwest, which has witnessed a surge in violence. Those traveling in the convoy were ambassadors and officials from Indonesia, Portugal, Kazakhstan, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Zimbabwe, Rwanda, Turkmenistan, Vietnam, Iran, Russia, and Tajikistan. All of them later returned to the capital, Islamabad, according to Pakistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. James Brooks, also at the World Desk of the Associated Press, brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. 5 months after a devastating fire destroyed more than half of Copenhagen's old stock exchange, workers are set to begin the reconstruction of the 400-year-old building to return it to its former glory. King Frederick X of Denmark will lay a foundation stone this Thursday within part of a red brick wall that survived the mid-April blaze, commencing a years-long reconstruction plan. We will do this as fast as possible to have Bursen ready for the Copenhageners, for the Danes, for the world again, said Lars Dugard Jepsen, head of reconstruction at Denmark's Chamber of Commerce, which owns the building. He used the Danish name for the stock exchange building, the Børsen. On Friday, there will be an open day event where visitors can come and see what is left of the downtown exchange. Construction started in 1615 and first opened in 1624. It is considered a leading example of Dutch Renaissance style in Denmark. In the early morning of April 16th, a violent fire tore through the building, a major tourist attraction. The blaze toppled its green copper roof and iconic dragon tail spire. 2 days later, a large section of the building's outer wall collapsed inwards. As the fire raged, many, including ordinary people, ventured in to rescue artworks, and around 90% of the cultural objects were rescued from the fire. Authorities have yet to reveal the cause of the fire, but it is believed to have started on the building's roof, which had been wrapped in scaffolding because of ongoing renovation work to be completed for its anniversary in 2024. Instead of a renovated building, it is now a ruin, but there are detailed records of its design. That's nice. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know, Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.